We're now here again at the Net Zero Nuclear booth, and our theme for today at this panel will be the youth perspective on a nuclear-powered world. So, is nuclear forever? That's the question that we have to discuss today. Aurora, you're from Italy, and you're here together with another Italian pro-nuclear advocate sitting in front of you. And you're only 18. So what have your experience with nuclear in Italy, of course, because Italy has also been one of these, I would say, anti-nuclear countries. They were very affected after the Chernobyl accident, and there was a lot of fear-mongering in the media after that. So what are you experiencing in Italy, and most importantly, who are you?
So, hello everyone, I'm Aurora. I'm an 18 years old high school student from Italy, and I'm an admin and content creator for a science outreach page called Giovani Blu, Blue Teens, engaged in current communication about nuclear energy for other teenagers. I'm also a member of a committee which is called Nucleare Ragione, which brings together university students, professors, and experts in the nuclear industry. So the nuclear situation in Italy, if we want to think about popular opinion, is changing. Nowadays, two-thirds of Italian population under the age of 35 is actually more prone and optimistic about also considering nuclear energy into energy diversification. And we need to remember its key role against climate change. It's an amazing thing. I think it is the best example that we can have about what the humankind can achieve. We have this source of energy with low carbon emission, with a grid stability, the only industry that actually has in charge to manage its waste. And we need to know that. But when we talk about science and facts, there isn't much to debate in. What we need to work right now is a good information, because we know that people are still kind of biased by the fear of the past incidents. So that's why people actually need to inform a little better. A problem that we have in Italy is actually the education that we have. Speaking for myself, basically in Italy, when you're in middle school, okay, you have to write a thesis based on the subject that you like the most, maybe through the 3 years. The subject that interested me most was energy. And I remember that I talk about energy, and the few information that I got from Italian school books and Italian websites were mostly wrong. So I had this idea stuck in my mind for many, many years that nuclear energy was a bad source of energy. When I started high school, I started taking my first physics lesson. I started myself to inform a little better. I started to follow the Atom Advocate, the biggest Italian information page. And that's why I became passionate about this subject, because we need to inform students. We need to inform people in a right, objective, and realistic way. That's why I became an admin and content creator for Giovanni Blu.
One thing I've heard from your Aurora as well, or other Italian activists, is that there's actually a lot of people in Italy that want nuclear, but there is some kind of belief, there's some kind of ghost that travels around, that anti-nuclear ghost that make things not get done. But earlier this year, the Italian government, they actually did something with a law or a decision. Can you explain a little bit more about, has there happened some political events in Italy that is in favor of nuclear now, and where are Italy going in the future?
Okay, so right now in Italy, we are kind of divided between what we consider the climate deniers and the one that glorify climate anxiety. So as a teenage girl myself, I have to deal with what other teenagers are doing. And not all of them are actually considering nuclear as part of the solution. And that's why the nuclear movement is starting to begin. That's why we want this sort of renaissance. On the political side, we kind of have a few issues, because right now the dialogue is mostly polarized. Unfortunately, nuclear power is mostly discussed among the right parties, and that's kind of a bad problem, because I don't see why a technology can only be considered from one side of the discussion and not just as it is and for its priorities. We have a Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, who's nowadays not really talking about fission. She mostly talks about fusion in climate change, considering short-term global goals, which are literally unconsiderable right now. So we need to underline the key role that fission might have in climate change, against climate change, because we need to diversify. We need to consider it as a right technology, and Italy must be a key point for that.
You get to a very interesting point in the discussion, like when the nuclear debate becomes politicized, like when you have ideology put into it, when you have the left and the right, you have the conservatism, you have the liberalism. And that's something like a lot of young people today with the climate agenda, they're most leaning to the left of the spectrum in politics. So do you think that this is a problem for the nuclear debate is that it is being recognized as maybe a more right-wing topic in young people, and they don't want to commit to the cause because they don't want to be put into the same box as people from the right wing. Are you experiencing that in Italy, that there's like the left wing is a little bit of afraid to touch on nuclear because it's associated with the right wing?
Personally, I think so. When I went to climate manifestations such as Fridays for Future, I talked with my peers, I've discussed with them. Most of them rely mostly on left parties because they see it as the green, the renewable thing, as the most reliable thing that we can have against climate change. But as I said, I don't think that that technology should be considered as part of a political plan. We need to consider it for the best key points that we might add to the energy diversification. We also need to consider that young people want to do their best to also do actual something against climate change. When they say, okay, we want to fight against it, and I went to them and say like, okay, what are your solutions? What are your plans for that? And they say, oh, we want 100% renewable energy commitment. And I'm like, okay, but are you cautious about intermittency or other problems that comes with that? They say no, but since I don't rely on nuclear power on the things they said, I think that it's better to go on the left side. And this is kind of a problem. We need to actually come along. We need to discuss together, not only from a political point of view, but what we actually need to do to decarbonize.
So it seems impossible for Spain to actually go through with these phase out. But Aurora, in Italy, what do you think the future will bring for the nuclear industry and also advocacy? Do you think that you will actually manage to push through and actually begin building nuclear plants in Italy? Because, of course, we know it's not just something that you do overnight. It takes at least a decade for a new coming country into the nuclear sector to actually connect their nuclear reactors to others. Where do you think Italy is in 10 years?
Well, right now in Italy, we mostly depend on gas with a 12-15% of imported energy. So we need to understand that if we want to meet the 2050 global goals issue, we need to actually consider also nuclear through the energy diversification. We had an history, in Italian history, with nuclear power plants. We did them in the history, in the 60s. They were great. And some people might say, oh, but you had the 2011 referendum, so you cannot do it anymore. Well, that's not actually true. We're still able to actually do something, and that's why we need to inform people. That's why we actually need to do advocacy, because climate change is not going to wait for us. And since nuclear is our only solution, we need to do something right now.
Thank you so much for participating in this panel. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you all for listening.